So here's a look at the Performance Design XS LS3 intake. It's a pretty cool looking piece. It clears the stock C6 hood just fine, and that's even with my track spec vents that do stick out a bit. Nothing touches, so it clears perfectly. These are just my lines for my catch can and the whole PVC system. Only things that you have to technically modify to bolt on this intake is the coil pack brackets. So you do have to remove the plastic housing that protects the harness wiring, and that so that the bracket can sit flush against the valve covers, and also behind the brackets in that little pocket between the valve cover and the intake is where you're gonna kind of hide the fuel injector plugs. So they're gonna sit in there and you can't see them now, but that gives them room to tuck in there, and then the bracket bolts on as normal. And they do send you or they do include spacers. Let's see it here for the coils. See how they're spaced out, and that's to bring them out so that the edge of the intake fits, because the plenum is so much bigger than stock. But everything fits in there nicely. You have more of the harness wiring exposed, but it cleans up quite nicely if you take your time. Now let me show you the other side to the other modification I had to do. So on this side, I found out that the coil bracket kept hitting the fuel fitting here, the fitting coming out of the intake and where it attaches to the stock fuel line. So as you can see there behind it, I had to kind of cut and notch the bracket. So I just cut from there to here, turned it into basically a two-piece bracket, which is actually works out because it makes it easier to work on stuff. I can just take this section off to access anything down here without having to touch that in the back. And then just cleaned up my wiring. This is just my big charging cable to the alternator, and this is my evap line, which is still connected, and there's the fitting for it. Everything comes included, all the hardware and everything. So let's pop this off here so you guys can see what this looked like. People have been wondering what's in there. So it just pops off like that. It has these rubber grommets, and these are just the top bolts that help seal the intake. The torque down process is really easy. It just starts back here, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. You just go all the way across, and then these top four are the last four that you bolt down. I suggest a long Allen tool like this, wrap mine in tape so it doesn't scratch up the intake. That way you get access to those bolts. Other than that, this just presses right on, just like that. So pretty nice piece, pretty basic install. Alright, so it is a pretty basic install. I'm not gonna do a how-to video because this is one of these jobs where if you don't know what you're doing, you probably shouldn't touch it. You shouldn't have to watch a YouTube video to learn how to install this. It is much more involved than installing your standard LS intake. LS intake's like 10 bolts and it pops right off. Disconnect your map sensor and your brake booster line and you're there. This intake comes in 3 pieces. You have to take it apart when you first get it. You have to take the fuel rails out, which are internal on the intake, and you add your fittings and vacuum nipples to the intake. You add on your brake booster hose, all of that before even putting it on the heads on the car. So once you have all your fittings on there, your brake booster line, then you put the bottom section on top of the cylinder heads, and you bolt that down, and you torque it down to sequence. They use the 10, they give you all the hardware, so you don't reuse any of the stock hardware. The 10 bolts that they send you for to bolt down the bottom section of the intake to the cylinder heads, which is going to be the main factor of it sealing against the heads, they use an O-ring right below the head. So my recommendation is, and I don't believe it's in the instructions, but something I did is I put a little bit of just super grease, any synthetic grease on the O-rings, just a little bit, so that you can torque it down and they won't get hung up or damaged on install. A lot of O-rings and gaskets on this intake, so just grease all of them down. Trust me, it'll make everything just fit and bolt down much easier. So once the bottom section is on the heads, then you assemble the fuel rail. So it's just 2 fuel rails, 4 plugs, you know, 1 on each end, and the hose that attaches both sides together. Super basic fuel rail install, and the fuel attachment, and that's it. The fuel attachment fitting. You take your stock injectors, you put the rear 2 injectors on the rear 2 runners of the intake. The other 6 injectors go on the fuel rail, and then you slide it in there at an angle, and it's not like you can see, and you bolt down the fuel rail. Again, grease all your fuel injector O-rings. It would be a perfect time to get new ones. I had just changed mine out not too long ago, so I didn't have to change them out. But if you got, you know, old injectors, get new O-rings, grease them up, and that way everything slides into place. Very tight tolerances on this fitting. Some, like the injectors, might not want to just get squeezed down right away, so you might have to align the fuel rail with the injectors, put in the 2 bolts, and slowly bolt down the fuel rail, and that will seat the O-rings. Slowly, one side at a time, you know, using some grease on the O-rings. And you know, you don't want to rush through this job and try to just smash everything down together. It's a tedious install. If you want to minimize any risk of leaks, and whether fuel leaks or vacuum leaks. So fuel rails bolted on, you know, other than that, normal, just 4 bolts, 2 on each side, and the stock fuel line connects to it as if it were stock. After that, it's just the lid, and you bolt the lid on, and you torque it down to sequence. Before you do that, though, just don't start the car, just put it on start to run the fuel pump, check for any leaks. That way you know that you're good. After that, you just bolt the lid on and you torque it down to spec. Everything else is pretty much the same. The way you the brackets that go onto your valve covers, nothing else is really special. Everything else hooks up, all your hoses, everything's the same. The throttle body did not change location. It sits exactly the same, so you don't have to worry about modifying a cold air intake in any type of way. Everything should bolt up just fine. I still have the stock throttle body on this thing, and I had no issues. Drove it for a few days, Drove it for a few days to make sure that the computer, the ECU, made all the fueling adjustments needed to all the added fuel coming in. It's a bigger plenum, and you will notice some differences. Because the plenum is bigger, you will lose a little bit of throttle response, and that's perfectly normal. Just because you have less airflow velocity because of the increased size of the plenum. However, after a couple days of driving, the throttle response got better, so you can feel the ECU make those adjustments. So when you do install the intake, make sure that the battery is disconnected. That way when you plug it back in, all the old fuel maps and everything has been erased from the memory of the ECU, and it can relearn everything, and it'll help the car run better and make adjustments quicker. So I did wait a few days of driving on the street, cruising on the freeway, before I did a little pull, and I wanted to compare it against a fourth gear pull that I did with the stock intake. So the very first test I did, the car from 80 miles an hour to 140 is almost a half second quicker. So, and I did the same stretch of road, same time of day, same ambient temperature, everything the same to try to recreate it. Only difference, the intake. So already half a second quicker, and everywhere from above 100 miles an hour, it just picked up acceleration. The only way a car's going to do that is if it picked up power. And you can, everyone says, right, seat of the pants, you can feel a difference between the stock intake and this thing at higher RPMs. At like 5,000 to redline, you can feel it pull hard, and it just wants to keep pulling. So, and the data shows that. It backed that up in the 80 to 140 mile an hour test. So I'm going to do more of those tests in acceleration. I did a few with the stock intake, so I'm going to go back to those locations wait for the same conditions, do those tests, and compare. But so far, the car is faster with the XS intake. So stay tuned for more testing. I would like to get it on the dyno and compare it to my previous dyno sheet with the LS3 intake. This car's had the same tune for like the last 5 years. So we're gonna do a pull with just the intake, same tune, and then we're gonna look at the tune and see if there's anything to gain retuning the car for this new intake, just to see how much potential we can get out of basically a stock LS3. And if you're wondering, this car is it's a header only car, 3-inch X pipe, bullet mufflers, just has a custom axle back, Corsa cold air intake, and the tune, there's not a real doesn't really have a lot of power mods. It has a lot of reliability mods. Rocker arms have ARP studs. I did upgrade to pack valve springs because I do track the car as in road race track days. So that's for longevity. It has improved racing, oil pan baffles, crank scraper, which actually does free up a little bit of power, but it's not really a power mod per se. And before, the car was around 420 rear wheel horsepower. So we'll see if it picked anything up. That'll be very interesting. I did a leak down test on this engine 2 months ago, and across all cylinders it has like an average of 2% leak down. So this engine, despite having 110,000 miles, runs like an absolute top. So the only reason though I got this intake is because I am gonna put together an engine for this car. I am gonna rev that engine past 7,000 RPM, which the stock intake is kind of limited to about 6,500. doesn't flow great after that. So I wanted something that would flow beyond 7,000, that would still make good torque with long runners like this thing, so that I can keep a nice power and torque curve in the mid-range. And we're going to put on some bigger cylinder heads and a nice big cam, possibly on another block. That's why I got this intake, because I have plans for more power. I paid $900 for this intake. It normally costs $1,000. It was on sale. So it's up to you. If you have a stock car that's going to stay stock, I don't know if a half a second quicker in those areas or just the looks of the intake is worth $1,000 to you. But if you need an intake that's going to support more power on a bigger engine, bigger heads with a big cam, that you want to take past 7,000 RPM without losing a bunch of torque due to short runners, this might be your ticket. And I think that for $900, it's a hell of an intake. And if all the numbers keep proving to be true, I think it's going to be the best LS3 intake on the market, especially for NA setups. Now, for you supercharged guys, they do say that the intake can handle up to 20 psi of boost. So there's probably a lot of big gains to do there. Now, another friend of mine with an LS3 C6 with plans to do a blower just ordered one of these after seeing what it's doing so far on this setup. So we are going to be testing this thing NA builds and also supercharged builds. So stay tuned, man. It's going to be fun. This thing not just looks awesome, it seems to be performing pretty awesome too. So it's a long video, but just in case any of you are interested in buying it and just wanted to know some details before you pull the trigger, because you know, $900 is still $900. Hopefully you got something out of this. Anyway, stay tuned, more to come.